Hey, how's it going, everyone? So, I wanted to address universal basic income again because I keep getting a lot of questions about it, and I keep hearing the exact same rationales for why universal basic income is inevitable, and all of them are fallacious and they don't match anything about what we know with economics. So, first and foremost, I'll describe what universal basic income is. And what it is there is an income that is given to everyone, usually in some type of country, nation, or some form of government collective. And that money can be given in one of two ways. Either it's just being printed, which is pretty much the worst possible way to do that, or it is a type of wealth allocation that comes from maybe nationalizing a certain production and then distributing the profits from things being sold. So, for example, if a government nationalized all of the oil slash gas industry in a country, they would do that and then from the sales of that industry, distribute everyone a certain amount of money from the sales of those products, and that could be sold internationally. So the reason why universal basic income doesn't work whatsoever is because whenever people are given money that, or you could say credit value, market value, without having to have worked for it first to produce something, then there is this incentive here that people don't have to do anything in order to consume or accept that money. So to make this very clear, if someone is just given money, that person doesn't have to do anything in response for that, and they can choose to spend that money on things that are consumed. So for example, if someone buys food and eats that food, once it's been eaten and digested, it's over. It's finished. Once someone uses maybe, for example, an experience, with money, so they go on a cruise vacation, they go visit somewhere, expending gas, expending the labor of others, and so on and so forth. That's it. It's consumed. There's nothing that's being produced necessarily when someone is given money, and there's no strings attached. And so what happens is that as money is given out to people just at large, then those people are able to spend that money on things that are consumed. And so what happens is you eventually reach a shrinking economy. And the reason for this is because those people who are being given the money are not necessarily having to use it for producing things that people want. They don't necessarily have to take that money and spend it and say, hey, I'll give you this money to the next person to create something new or to create some new efficiency in the market or to provide value to others. It's wholly a subjective value, and it's able to be completely consumed by the user. So what happens is now someone with money is, for example, giving that money to somebody else who maybe has labored to produce food or range for the production of food. Well, now the person who has produced food loses that food. It gets consumed by the person, but the other person doesn't necessarily have to have produced something of value in return to the other party or to anybody else, really. It can be wholly consumed. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that when there's voluntary trade and it's subjectively valued. There's nothing wrong with consuming food or luxury items or vacations or anything like that. The issue there is just the incentives of when there are resources that are just handed out, or communication tools that is money is just being handed out to people, and all they have to do then is just use that and consume the labor and work product of others. Some will try to counter argue against this and say, oh, well, when people are given money, at large, it frees them up to explore their passions. And when you give somebody money and they're able to meet their basic needs, well, now, they're free to maybe do things that are advancing science or mathematics or some type of economic efficiency. Unfortunately, that is just probably not true based on a history of humanity. People don't tend to go and spend their time, money on doing things that are difficult or risky if it's going to be an expense to them. You know what I mean? When you are doing things that are a high level of technological advancement. If you're doing things that are experimental, it has a time cost. It has a potential physical resources cost for the prototyping and experimenting. And so, by and large, when people are faced with a situation where they could either just enjoy the resource that they have and be hedonistic with it, or take some risky road where they might expose themselves to some type of harm or problem or difficulty, market wise, most people end up taking the easy road, because why would anybody want to do anything that is, risky or get them in legal trouble or potentially dangerous, or really exhausting, if they don't have to? Why work and do something that is risky when you're given money and now you can spend that and consume it? You don't have to do anything. You can watch movies, eat, delicious food, go on vacation, travel, this or that. There's nothing that is incentivizing anyone to produce any type of value to others. So even though there will probably be people who do use that opportunity as a time for some type of advancement in the market, science, medicine, mathematics, physics, engineering, whatever. The question is not that, or the issue there is not that there won't be those people, but that those are going to be the significant minority. It's not really like something that is going to be mainstream. By and large, people, if given the opportunity for luxury and pleasure with little risk, little effort, they're going to go that route. The incentives for hard work, the incentives for taking risk, come in the form of the profit motive. So in other words, taking the risks, using resources for the long-term value creation for others that comes back in the reaping of rewards in profits. That's why people do those things. And that's why in many countries that are too command and control over their economies, too socialist or, communist style. I mean, communism's kind of relative there, but they're basically government command and control economies. You look at Cuba and other places in Venezuela, people tend to avoid doing difficult work that's regulated, and where they're not able to reap the rewards of their labor. So where do people take risks? Well, you look at Cuba and you see that even doctors and engineers would rather be taxi drivers because they can earn more money getting tips from foreigners visiting than doing the hard and risky work of having to operate on somebody, than having to deal with people who are sick. It's one of those things where the incentives are very clear. How do you want to be rewarded? Well, people tend to be or tend to want to be rewarded for the difficulty of the work, the risk of the work, and the value that they are providing for others. So universal basic income subverts that communications process, and it ends up fundamentally just leading to raised prices. So if there's no other market restrictions, then if everybody's getting this no strings attached money, well, then typically prices start to go up as producers recognize that they can capture that value because everyone's already given this. And so the producer's like, well, okay, people are going to be just buying stuff off the shelf and themselves not working. So we better raise prices to not lose inventory to meet the giving to everyone of that money. And that happens with anything where there's just cheap money, cheap credit, and the like. If you look at college tuition spiking with government-backed loans and grants, when the government just handed out everybody money in order to go to school, the universities, of course, saw the opportunity, said, okay, well, we can jack up our prices to capture the government's freely giving out money to people. And so you saw there, especially post 2000, the college prices going up dramatically, and they were capturing all of that cheap money that everybody was getting because lots of people who may have not really known what they wanted to do with their lives were just like, okay, I guess I'll just go to college because I can just get a loan for it and I'll figure it out one day. There was no material investment and investigation to the person's talents and abilities and their drive. It's just, okay, well, I guess I'll go to college and I'll go into debt because I can, and whatever with the consequences. And that led to there being over $1 trillion in debt with student loans, with over 137 billion in default. So it's one of those things where the end results are very clear with universal basic income. Now, some also try to say, well, it's just inevitable because eventually there'll be enough machines and robots and computer programs that, it'll be somewhat post-scarcity. There'll be, the fundamental needs of everybody met by machines. And this is, of course, flawed too, because every single type of demand that could possibly ever exist in the market just cannot be made and met by every type of machine. As long as there is anything that can possibly be demanded by people that cannot be met by machines in a unique way, well, there's going to be then a market demand for those things, and people are going to be willing to pay for it. People are going to be willing to work toward that end. And the need for people to either work on or fix or adjust machines to tailor to those interests potentially is going to be there as well. And so, with that in mind, this idea of like there being a post-scarcity uh, is a large bit of science fiction. It would require that all, resources that could possibly ever be demanded are seemingly infinite. Because if you could have, unrestricted access to all resources and so on and so forth, there is scarcity. So just because, okay, there's machines that might be able to create or generate electricity from the environment, burning things or, renewables or, burning coal or, burning petroleum, processing petroleum, doesn't mean that then suddenly, okay, well, now everybody can freely use and consume those resources unlimitedly. It doesn't mean, okay, well, now I can just spend every day of the year traveling across the world because there's somehow, this post-scarcity. Again, all resources are eventually going to be subject to scarcity. All natural physical resources are going to have scarcity. Not everybody can stand at the same spot on the beach at the same time. You're not going to be able to get that. You're not going to be able to have a house situated facing waterfront view for every single person and that point. There's going to be scarcity. There's going to be scarcity when it comes to ideas being implemented, because not every single thing can be implemented at once. There's competing interests as to what people want where. And so as long as there are competing interests and there is natural scarcity, there's always going to be a need for people to meet those demands. And the technological advancements, while making things certainly cheaper, absolutely, won't be able to overcome every single element of natural scarcity or customization for what people desire. It's as simple as saying, okay, do you like pizza? But just because someone likes pizza doesn't mean they like every single kind of pizza that's out there. There's literally millions of different types of pizza places and, frozen pizzas and this or that. And guess what? There's not going to be some uniform post-scarcity design that makes pizzas exactly the way somebody wants in the exact time, in this exact manner. There comes to a head different types of flavors and environments where that pizza's flavor is unique to the people who are making it. The water that's used, local water. A lot of people talk about this, like New York pizza and bagels versus something in the South, how it's much different. There's always going to be nuance to taste that just won't be able to be met realistically with machines alone, especially when it comes to the concept of scarcity. Of course, some people will be like, well, maybe there'll be machines that simulate that, and that's of course interesting too. It reminds me of like Demolition Man. You put on a headset, and then it simulates your having a certain desire met, but stimulating those parts of the brain that simulate um, different experiences and so on and so forth. But even that is not actual scarcity in terms of material goods and real world things. The idea that someone is being artificially stimulated is kind of like the Matrix. You're just getting plugged in and having your brain think that you're getting something that is maybe not reality. Maybe you're eating a pizza, and maybe in the future, there's something that stimulates your brain to make you think it tastes as good as the best pizza you've ever had. Certainly possible, but again, even those machines, the maintenance of them, the production of energy for them, fixing them, customizing them, even those things that might start to remove some barriers to access to different things artificially are going to require the human touch, the human element. And so, really, what we're going to end up seeing with this movement in technology I think, is that what the government's going to be doing is they're going to be regulating intentionally out people from being able to enter the market at lower levels. So what happens is that as technology starts to advance and low skilled workers, that is the need for low skilled workers starts to decline with current market conditions, the government will keep pushing up minimum wage and keep pushing up the regulatory barriers that makes it pretty much impossible for people to get entry level experience or work. So what happens is the government artificially creates this environment, a very toxic environment, where large groups of people can't get the skills they need to advance because they can't enter in the market, they can't work for less than minimum wage, they can't meet all the very expensive regulations that the government sets in order to keep the current players playing without any competition. And so you get this large underclass of people who will then say, well, how are we supposed to survive? And then they'll point to say, well, we need this post-scarcity environment kind of thing where the government redistributes wealth with universal basic income and things like that. But that's actually a product of the government manipulating the economy uh, through minimum wage, through business regulation, and through property taxes. If it wasn't for those things, then people could actually provide value to their local economies much more readily. They could exploit their land to produce things of value much more readily. Um, but of course, the government doesn't want that. The government doesn't want people having that kind of individual independence. And so, through city rules restricting land use, that is residential land use, through minimum wage laws, through business licensing regulations, where it's just literally you're paying money and having to register and file all this paperwork just to even start having a business, the government creates this artificial type of problem with people not being able to work and saying we need the government to step in and redistribute wealth for us or to give us some type of basic income, which at the end of the day will still of course fail. It will still eventually cause a big problem as prices start to rise up to meet that money that everybody's getting but not having to work for. And so it's really government creating the problem and trying to offer the solution, and some people trying to say, well, this is the solution we need because technology is just leading to people not being able to work, but it's really the government who's keeping people from being able to engage in the market even at a micro smaller level. So that's really what UBI boils down to. It's just a nasty economic mess. It's a lie about providing individuals value, and a lot of the reason why there are people out there who are still touting it is because of the economic conditions that have been foisted upon everybody by government. Government is fully responsible for creating the environment where people can't get market skills through working for less than minimum wage, through starting a business without having to pay a huge sum of money in order to be allowed to start a business to begin with. And so, that's what it really boils down to when you look at the situation. But it's interesting. There are going to be some places that can maintain a form of that for a while if the government is using a natural resource. So, for example, if the government uh, claims to have total ownership over oil, or as I mentioned, petroleum or something of that nature, and they selling it on an international level and giving the profits largely back to the people, yeah, that could work for a little bit until, of course, they can't keep up with the economy elsewhere, and people substitute out uh, alternative goods for that good. You can see that even with oil, petroleum, as people try to say, well, how do we use other sources of energy to replace petroleum and gas? How do you use electricity, or other types of cleaner gases, hydrogen gas, and so on and so forth. Uh, People are trying to look for ways to replace that. Of course, when that starts happening, if demand goes down or changes or shifts, well, now the incomes change and shift for everybody on that money that was coming in from the government side of the resource. So, some governments can try to do that, but again, it's the government will just be introducing more market inefficiencies by monopolizing that resource. And eventually, of course, once competition arises, even those resources can fall out of favor and be replaced or outmoded, and then you're back to square one. So I know it was a long video, but I hope that kind of clarifies the situation on UBI. Take care, everybody.